Item 5.1 is the consideration of recommendations from the Audit and Risk Committee on the 19th of August. You'll see a resolution there. Is there any comments on that item? Any discussion?
Just through the chair to note in the minutes as been recorded here that the Audit and Risk Committee made a request to the Council's program to see if they could investigate savings to that amount to offset this unbudgeted expenditure. We acknowledged it was an important piece of work to do, but at this stage in the year we were hopeful that savings could be made elsewhere.
Okay. But there is a resolution or a recommendation, which means it is a resolution of this council. So is there a mover and a seconder for that? Sorry, Councillor Boddy.
Just a point of clarification. Councillor Jollins has mentioned there was something in addition to this. Should that not be incorporated in a resolution from this council?
Just through the chair, at the Audit and Risk Committee, it was minuted at the time that that was our direction for staff to look at. However, it wasn't deemed necessary to be recorded in the resolution.
So I think if you look across the page, it's the first part of 4.5 where it says members agreed to progress the recommendation to council. However, they signalled a desire for savings to be made to offset. So that was the point that Councillor Jollins referred to.
No, true. Your move, Councillor Stewart. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kingy. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Move on to item 5.2. Clear. We've got three representatives from the Transport Agency. Janine, John and Greg. Would you like to come forward? This is to do with the proposed speed changes on State Highway 1 south of Taupo to Turangi. So is there a leader or are you going to share?
I will introduce them first. This agenda item is basically to take councillors through the proposed speed limit changes on State Highway 1 south of the Taupo Airport roundabout to Motuapa. And I've got NZTA here to actually talk you through the processes to where they've got to now and the process from here on in. On my far right, I've got Craig McGibbon, who's the Community Engagement Manager for NZTA. In the middle, I've got John Garbage, who's the Senior Safety Engineer for NZTA. And next to me, I've got Janine Stewart, who's the, correct me if I'm wrong here, Area Program Manager for the Waikato Safe Network Program. So I'm going to hand them over to them and take you through the proposals.
Thanks, Claire, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Council, for allowing us to come here and speak to you today about our speed management proposal. Can I take the report as read? But I'll take you through it. So firstly, I would just like to acknowledge the work that Claire Charland and her team have been doing in the District Council here on speed management, because she's been doing a fantastic job and working really well with the rest of the Waikato councils, including Waikato and Waipa and Hamilton City, who've been extremely proactive in their work in speed management. Just a bit breaking news. Waipa District Council today at the council agreed, they signed off on their bylaw changes, which is 200 speed limit changes in the Waipa district, so that got signed off by council today, which is really good news for the council because they put a lot of work into that. So just to provide you, I'll talk about the why are we doing it, and then I'll hand over to Craig to talk about the process for consultation and engagement that we're going through just now. And we've got John Garvich, who's our principal safety engineer, who can talk to you in more detail about some of the technical issues and questions that you may have. So just some background. So what we know is that every week in New Zealand, there are 7 people killed approximately every week, and 54 seriously injured on our roads, with devastating consequences for communities in whānau. We know also and acknowledge in Taupo District earlier this year, in April, May, the devastating fatalities that occurred with several multiple crashes that occurred in the network. So we know that New Zealand performs poorly in terms of road safety when we compare it with other OECD countries. And just to give you some, I'll just refer you to the graph there, 1.2, where it shows it's actually saying that there's 7.6 deaths per 100,000 population. We actually think that's about 8 per 100,000. Just to put that in context, if we compare that with similar jurisdictions and populations of around 5 million, we can look at Ireland, which has got 3.2 deaths per 100,000. Scotland, where I'm from, 3.5 per 100,000. Norway, 2.5. So you can see that New Zealand is really quite high up in that range. So in order to address this, the government proposed the Safe Network programme at the end of last year in December 2018. And if you recall, I presented to you on the Safe Network programme when I was here a few months ago. But just to reiterate for those that weren't there, the programme covers state highways, local roads, speed management, and also some high-risk level crossings. It is a $1.4 billion programme over the next 3 years. So we're rolling out that as we go. It's based on the basic premise of the SAFE system, which I'll refer you to the diagram here, which you're probably familiar with. But that is based on the premise that we all make mistakes. We've all gone a bit faster than we should, or crossed an intersection when we shouldn't. The premise of the SAFE system is that when people do make mistakes, you don't need to die because of it. So it addresses the 4 pillars, which is the safe roads and roadsides, safe vehicles, safe road use, which is around driver behaviour, and what we're talking about today here, which is speed management. So with speed management, if we're going to do and make a difference to reduce our deaths and serious injuries in the country, which we have to do, then speed management is a very effective way of doing that. And we need to have a real serious discussion in the country about speed management. We know that it increases both the likelihood of crashes and the severity of the outcome when they occur, especially when vulnerable users such as pedestrians and cyclists are involved. So what we're saying is that most crashes, there's a number of contributing factors. It could be the road, it could be fatigue, it could be alcohol, but we know that even when speed doesn't cause the crash, that the severity of the impact is fairly devastating. Figure 1.4 shows you some infographics just to highlight what we're trying to address here in terms of the kinetic energy of speed. And if you look at the skyscraper building there, that just shows the impact of a crash at speed. 150 kilometres an hour is the equivalent of a fall from a 30-storey building. And obviously the slower you go, the less impact it has when you're down to 30 kilometre an hour crash is equivalent to a first-storey building fall, so you could walk away from that. We know that every week there's 11 people either killed or seriously injured due to speed-related crashes. And we know that in last year that speed was a factor in 102 of the fatal crashes. So that's just giving you some background of why we need to address speed at this stage, because it's such an issue. The social cost, $879 million a year. And also, we speak to the trauma surgeon in the Waikato DHB, Mr. Grant Christie, who often talks about, we look at the social cost, but it's also the other missed opportunities for people needing hip replacements or heart operations. That they can't get those done because of the trauma on our roads. So it has a knock-on effect there as well. We talk about, we're often told it'll slow us down if you drop the speed on certain limits. Well, we know that actually, if you can see there, reducing speed by 10% adds 6 to 8 seconds on a 6-kilometre trip. So we do know that it's not such a big issue as some people think. So as part of the Safe Network programme, we're rolling out speed management throughout the country. This one is the first in the Waikato, so it's the first one that we're rolling off. But we're currently identifying roads throughout the country where we can see we'll get the biggest reduction in deaths and serious injuries looking at speed management. So the review is it is a legal process, and I'll show you the diagram 1.5. It shows you the process steps that we go through. So I'll just hand you over to Craig at this point, and you can explain where we're at on this journey.
I'm a Red's chair, so I hope this isn't the Graham Norton show, because probably isn't going to be that funny. But anyway, just in terms of the engagement process, it's really important from the Transport Agency's perspective that we don't just go out there and go changing the speed limits without engaging with our key stakeholders and also the community. There we go, is it better? Sorry. So yeah, the key thing for us is that we make sure we do engage with the community that's going to be affected by these speed changes. So as a starting point, we're going through the process now of liaising with who we see as our key stakeholders. That includes Taupo District Council, Tūwhare Toa, RTA, Automobile Association, National Road Carriers, just to ensure that what we're proposing is consistent with their own thinking and for them to provide feedback. And following this, we do what we call the public engagement part of the process. And what we're looking to do is have drop-in sessions at the Taupo Market, at the Kura at Waitanui, and also at the New World in Turangi. And this just gives us an opportunity to present very much the information you've seen today, and to get feedback on what we are proposing. And by doing that ahead of the formal consultation process, it does give us an opportunity to make any tweaks to what we're doing, and understand that community sentiment before we go into that formal process. So we're very much at the end of the stakeholder engagement as of today, and in mid-September is when we'll go out to the community and hold those drop-in sessions. And then following that, I'm anticipating by October we'll be in a position to start the formal consultation process, and that's when people make formal submissions on the speed review, and that's what the agency then takes into consideration in terms of making their determination on changing those speed limits.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Yes, hi. I'm John and Craig. I sit on the Waikato Regional Transport Committee for Taupo District, and I'm just a little bit confused. At the July meeting, Ross from NZTA told us that the business cases for Pariri to Taupo and Taupo to Waiouru had been shelved, but yet in the agenda for next week it says that that work is continuing, had good engagement with mana whenua, and the project teams are working closely with the speed review and safe network program teams to make sure that you're aligned. Why was I told, or why was Taupo told, that those business cases were off the table, yet I'm sitting here seeing that the speed review and safe network program team is working with the business case team to ensure that the projects align? I'm somewhat confused.
I'm not quite sure the background to that, but I think perhaps what the director was saying was that the funding had been stopped, had been shelved, right? So that was probably, I'm not quite, I don't think I was there when he said that, but I know that there is work continuing on that, so I can raise that with the director when I get back to the office.
If you could, that would be much appreciated, because I will be bringing it up next Monday in Hamilton.
Yep.
Business cases. There's two business cases that they're talking about there. One is from Kiriri to Wairaki, and one from Taupo to Waiouru. And the Kiriri to Wairaki business case has got to the stage where it's to the pre-implementation stage, and they're now looking at options for moving beyond that. The one from Taupo to Waiouru has got to the stage where they've stopped putting any more ability to do the construction side of it, but that doesn't mean it's been canned. It means it's waiting for the funding to arrive. And that means that we can then align the speed management program with what's already been planned for that business case. And that business case complemented quite nicely what we would be wanting to do for speed management along that route.
Just through the chair, I'm absolutely delighted to hear that from you, from NZTA, but I just hope that perhaps you can all be on the same page when I raise it in Hamilton next week.
I'll make sure that happens, Councillor.
That gives some assurance, I think, Councillor Park, that we haven't lost the fight yet.
So just continuing, so we've heard from some of the communities along this stretch that we're looking at that they feel that the speeds are too high and not safe. So what we do know about the route is that we know that it's used by many people, especially in summer periods when the numbers go up through the campground at Mochitere. There's lots of cyclists, pedestrians, people looking at the lake, and it gets really busy down there. Mochitere has regularly been raised as a concern because of the campground and the straddling over the road, and that drivers are turning in and out of entrances there. We also heard from Waitahanui and Turangi-Tongariro and Motuapa residents that current speed limits feel too high and they don't feel safe. And we also know that the speed limits and road treatments are varying along that route and are not consistent between the smaller settlements. We obviously, you will probably drive it a lot more than I do, but you know that there's steep drop-offs and tight corners around there. And there's also an issue that people have raised about the noise and vibration of heavy trucks going through the route, especially during the night, late at night. And significant portions of this route have been assessed as the top 10% high risk in the network. So those are the reasons that we're actually looking at this piece of road. Crash history, we know that in the years between 2009 and 2018, there were 226 crashes on that stretch of highway, with 8 fatalities and 30 people seriously injured on that. We know that the traffic volume has increased over the last 10 years, from approximately 5,500 vehicles every day to about getting up to 7,000. So that's a fairly significant increase in the traffic volume that's going through there. We have assessed the time difference with the proposal that we're looking at for speed reduction, and we've assessed it just over 1 minute, a bit slower, so it's not significant that we've looked at. So I'll just, if I could point you to the map now, we do have we have a couple of maps there we can show you. We've also got a really large one, which I can hold up. I'll get John to take me to hold up.
Just to introduce it really, and it's quite probably quite easy to understand what we're doing here is we're trying to get a regime of consistent speed management through the townships, and then higher speed limits in the what we would have called the rural sections, but not for the full extent. So we'd want lower speed limit than 100, which would be 80 kilometres per hour on some of the more difficult sections, and then some of the sections where it's easier to drive fast and overtake and do the things that people need to do, we would retain those at 100. Recognising that it's not the safest environment to be driving 100 anywhere in New Zealand on State Highway 1 that hasn't got a median barrier down the middle, but at the moment we're willing to take that as the feedback that we've got as 100 kilometres per hour would be appropriate for places like Hātepe Hill. Really, it makes sense. So the whole thing is we'd have 60 kilometre per hour through each of the villages, 80 for the rest, except for the Hātepe Hill area. Just going back, if you could remember back to 1989 when the Ministry of Transport had the traffic cops in it, they were the people that assessed speed limits for us, and all they were able to do then, because we didn't have all the databases that we have now, all they could do was assess roads and roadsides by how many dwellings were were accessing onto the highway itself. So we had 100 kilometres per hour for rural areas, and then we had 50 for urban areas, with a little bit in between where you could have a 70 kilometres per hour. We've got a lot more sophisticated now, and we're able to measure risk more than just the number of properties on the side of the road. We can look at the curvature, we can look at the road use, we can look at the number of crashes, the vehicle flows, and the crashes per vehicle flow to make a much more accurate assessment of what the safe and appropriate speed is. And that's what we've used to come up with these proposals. This would be the one that we would was in our top 10% in the country, in our list of top 10%, and also ones that have got a strong community support to see changes in speed limits through the area. So that's why we've picked this route as one of the first ones in the country to be done. But although we have a list of over 40 that we're looking at right across the country.
Yes, hello. And I know that you came to the community board the other day and did this presentation, but I know that it stops at Motuapa for this. Going through Turangi is another small settlement, and I would like to see that continued and changed down to a 70. And I know the board gave you a lot of feedback about the bridges and the roads and everything, so I hope you're still taking them on board.
Yeah, we do appreciate that feedback, and we've been able to take that now back to our national consistency look, and to see whether we can consider that extension of the route, which we're looking at now. But of course it's too soon since then and now to have done it, but we've certainly got it high on the agenda to see whether we can make that happen. That would be one of my wish lists as well. As you know, I've been trying to get something there, but we've just got to justify these things, and there's a whole list of people behind you that also want a roundabout somewhere. So it's great to know that people are so engaged in safety now. Back in 1989, they just thought it was collateral damage that you had 800 people die on the roads every year. Thanks, Janine.
Good afternoon, guys. Actually, my question's through the chair to Gareth Green. Just in terms of the submission process, will we as a council be making a formal submission?
Through the chair, yes, we will be.
And I guess as councillors we'll have an opportunity to feed into that, because there are some particular things I would like to highlight in the discussion as we move forward. And I appreciate your safe system process, but there are many different contributing factors to the crashes, not only speed. And I think when you talk to this community, and it's across our district, it is the condition of our roads that is of grave concern to many, many people that live here. So I guess what I'm saying, I'm urging this may be part of the solution, but please, it's not the total solution.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just supporting what Councillor Stewart and Jollins have just said, and I guess for the sake of consistency, because I've said this at the board the other week, obviously, well, I have a view that reducing a speed certainly does have an impact around those corners. As I said, 20 years in the fire service, I've seen most accidents in that stretch, so I know it all too well. But of course, another big part of this, and I think we may have touched on this, is the way that users interact with that stretch. So there's a lot of beautiful reserves. They want to interact with the lake. There's people pulling off. They're slowing down. So anything that sort of, I guess, prevents that ability for someone to whack the bum end of somebody else is, I guess, is a positive thing. Moratiri Camp is very definitely an interesting place when it's full at long weekends and whatnot. So it's I mean, I'm just surprised we haven't had any more things happen there, to be fair. And everybody loves our beloved Bully Point, or Te Porere Point. But certainly just what Maggie said, you know, Turangi well and truly has to be provided for in this. I mean, going through town is an interesting experience, and I've heard examples again about, we've talked about the split at Moratiri Camp. Well, yeah, Turangi's got that on a community scale. We split in half, so we need to make sure that that's absolutely reflected in the safety considerations as a community tries to cross over State Highway 1 at that point. Yeah. Thanks.
Any further questions, Councillor?
Through the chair, you're taking on board those comments from previous councillors, you know, absolutely. I'm just looking at the recommendation in the context of the review and the agenda item. Shouldn't the recommendation read, Taupo to Motuapa, not Turangi.
Fair comment, Councillor Williamson, yeah?
Yeah, through the chair, I support Councillor Williamson on this particular comment, and it talks to the points raised by Councillor Stewart and Councillor Kingy. Turangi is, I mean, I've sat on some hearings down in Turangi too about the intersection and the crossover, and I've seen the crash statistics, and it's an area we can't ignore.
We can definitely change it, yes. So if there's no further questions, the resolution's been changed to Motuapa. Is there a mover and a seconder, please, for that resolution? Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Seconded, Councillor Boddy. All in favour?
I will just make the point.
Oh, sorry.
I saw Turangi and then I thought if we're not wise enough, that would come through reading Turangi, which meant it would be on the books for something to be done. But unfortunately, someone picked it up.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for taking the time out to explain. And yep, all good. Thank you. So we'll move on to the Lake Terrace remediation work, unbudgeted expenditure. And we've got Dennis and Neil.
Just whilst Dennis and Neil are getting settled, I just want to make two comments. One is obviously this was a major event for our district, and more than anything, I'm really proud of the way that our staff reacted to it, and Dennis in particular has been project managing this since day one and has done an amazing job, so just want to publicly acknowledge that. The second thing is obviously there is still some legal risk around this matter. We are being investigated by Waikato Regional Council, as you would expect, and therefore there are some insurance implications for us. So the presentation today and in answering any of your questions, we won't be able to go anywhere near any causation or what caused the event, because that is something that's subject to that legal privilege.
So is Dennis leading the presentation? Good.
Sorry, the Ruapehu Street, we're looking at opening that tomorrow. We're still on target for opening the southbound lane towards the end of next week, and the northbound lane either the week later or about a week and a half later. It's dependent on how much progress we make with the MSE wall. Of significance last week, we opened up the stormwater system again. So up until last week, the stormwater was being pumped whenever we had rain. We had a guy switch the stormwater pumps on and they were pumping it down Ferry Road. So last week was quite a significant event for us. Other than reopening the gravity sewer main, was reopening the gravity stormwater main. I'm getting back to the report. I'll take the report as read, just have a few comments about it. The costings for the construction work are an estimate. That estimate was produced a couple of 3 weeks ago. The design, in an ordinary contract sense, you would engage someone to design a project, so you've got stormwater, sewer, water main, downstream defender, you'd get all the plans, provide them to a contractor, they'd go away and estimate. What we've got here is the design is being done as they build it. So the estimate's being produced while the design is being produced. So there's a bit of friction and a bit of guesswork, I guess, to put it bluntly, about trying to figure out exactly what it is that's going to be built. The design drawings were only finally completed about 7 or 8 days ago. That just reflects the complexities of the site with the interrelationship between sewer, stormwater, wall, downstream defender. It's been quite a complex project. So I'm just highlighting that these estimates for construction are just that, an estimate. So we've got in there estimates of total and budgeted spend of 4.5 million at this time. That's made up of 450k for the design and contract management through Opus and 3.8 million for the construction cost. And I'll put this up in a slide in a minute just so you can have a look, because I know there's a desire to see the breakdown of some of those costs. Over the last couple of days we've had, over the weekend we had a couple of breaks down on the water main further down Ferry Road. And there is a desire to renew that water main right down to where it links up with the PE that goes under the harbour. We've got an estimate for that work and also some contingency. So if you just bear with me a moment, I'll just, hopefully this works. Yes. So just take you through that. So the initial response, and these numbers are in the report. The initial response was 250k. That's an estimate because some of the costs haven't come through yet, and that's across everything. The Opus design project management at 450k. The Downer construct of 3.8 million, and it's broken up into those components. Those numbers have been rounded for obvious reasons. That in a normal world, a build like this, we wouldn't deconstruct the pricing. It would be a contract to do all of that work. So it would be a total sum, not a breakdown. So that gives the total of 4.5 million. With the Ferry Road water main and the design costs of 310, contingency of 190 would take it up to $5 million. So just to be clear, that would, you've got the initial response stays the same. The Opus total would be 460k and the Downer total would be 429k, 4.29 million. Giving a total of 5 million. Yes. Yep. No, I'm quite happy to share a copy of that.
That's the question. We wrote down here, the downstream defender.
Yes.
That was that addition we added while the work was being done. So effectively, if you took the 500 off,
yes,
that needed to be done at some stage. So that becomes part of the package.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
thank
correct.
you.
Just following up Councillor Body's point on that, that 500k for that defender, what would that cost if it was being done as a separate, as an estimate anyway?
I'm sorry I can't answer that
More,
one. And there's the reason for that. If we assume that what happened has happened and at some later stage you wanted to build a downstream defender, it would be very problematic because the downstream defender needs to be in the location downstream of the last manhole. Downstream of the last manhole is where the MSE wall is. Once you've built that wall, you can't unbuild it to put a downstream defender inside it. We're building the wall around the defender unit.
The other point on that though is that if the road wasn't closed, this work would never have happened, so we would never have got the downstream
Yes.
defender there. So just for clarity, is the one that our stormwater engineers have always said is the one that they wanted to do the most, given that it drains that part of the central business district. But because of the location with the road, etc., it would never have been able to be done. So that was why we made that decision really early on, that for this year we had 2 Mile Bay, downstream defender planned for 2 Mile Bay, and it was decided at this point let's put that on hold and instead use that money for this site. Now it's going to be more expensive, but it's obviously a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So, I wonder why we've got Neil sitting there. Could you tell us?
I'm just the eye candy.
Could you? Yeah. Could you tell us how we're going to pay for this, please?
Oh, sorry.
Have you finished, Dennis? Or
I guess the only other thing that I've got is that within the report and the recommendation, there's some numbers in there. If it's accepted that we do the additional water main and Ferry Road and the contingency sum, so some of those numbers will change, but I can address that after Neil's finished his piece, if you like.
I just had a question of Neil of Dennis through the chair before we move on to Neil. Dennis, the costs that you've presented to us are site specific, therefore repair and remediation of that site. Conversations with WRC in the future aside, is there anything else in scope that we might need to consider that you might come back to us later to seek funding for to support this?
The intention is with this is the final scope.
Possibly the one exception to that would be, and you mentioned Waikato Regional Council, so whatever happens there. And secondly is that we're in the stage of identifying some terms of reference for a independent review, and so we will come back asking for some funding around that.
So through the chair as well, just to add to that, we've undertaken 2 offers of services through GHD to do independent reviews of the causation, and also around some of the resilience questions that are coming out as well. So plus every time you send a piece of pipe away to be tested, it's the best part of $5,000. So that will add up as well.
And I guess we're having conversations with Tū Whare in this process as well, which will need to bear in mind.
So just to be clear, Council, this budget is for the initial response and the remediation, the physical works to remediate. That's it. Yeah.
so, Neil.
Right, well, I guess, yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a large event which has got a pretty big number attached to it. So I guess the first point I'd like to just cover is, you know, Council's been, through its financial strategy over a number of years, has been building resilience into its balance sheet. And, you know, there's a really good reason for that in any business, and, you know, particularly in a business like this. By doing that, that's enabled us to have, you know, built up reasonable reserves. As an example of that, the disaster recovery reserve is currently sitting at $1.9 million. You know, go back a number of years, that was, you know, basically nothing in it. So we've been building up that one. Also, you'll note our net debt position is considerably better than what it was a number of years ago, circa 12 million now. So I guess my first comment is the balance sheet is looking good. Okay, we've got good financial strength that's been backed up by Standard & Poor's ratings, etc. So that's just a kind of a high-level comment before I dive into the detail. In a project of this nature, as Dennis has alluded to, it's quite complex, it's multifaceted, there's transportation elements, there's water elements, wastewater elements, stormwater elements. All of those have different funding streams. On the third page of Dennis's report, at the top, we've spilt out the multiple sources that we consider that the funding will be coming from, or has potential to come from. Obviously, the first one that we've mentioned there is the $1.9 million that we have currently in our disaster recovery reserve. Through the financial strategy and the long-term plan, you would note that we're actually building that up over time as well at a rate of an increment rate of 50,000 a year from memory. So we'll still be looking to rebuild that fund should we use this funds here, which is our recommendation. There's also the transfer of the 2 Mile Bay stormwater budget, which we mentioned earlier as well. The water and wastewater reserves will be large contributors towards the funding of this project. However, we won't know what those final numbers will be until the project's finished. Normally, when we develop up a renewals budget, we actually know what we're going to renew, and you know what the costs are, so you can budget for accordingly. As Dennis has outlined earlier, this has been done as we go. So once the project's finished, we'll go back through all of the numbers. We'll work out which elements relate to which piece, be it a water renewal, be it a wastewater renewal, or is it a new bit of kit that's actually gone in there, which will have a different funding source. Brian and I also have a meeting scheduled on the 4th of October with McDem to see what opportunities may exist in that space there as well. And then last but not least, obviously, is loan funding is another avenue available to us. So we can't tell you exactly what the numbers will be from each of those elements at the moment, but they are the funding streams that will be used, or that we're recommending to be used. To give you some comfort, I guess there's $8 million sitting in the district wastewater reserve at the moment. The stormwater and transportation actually come under the same reserve. There's currently $10 million sitting in there, and throughout the water reserves, there's quite a bit there as well. So, as I say, it's an event that, for multiple reasons, we would rather have not happened. But we do have a strong balance sheet, and we are able to absorb these costs. There will be obviously a knock-on effect to delay in other programs. All of that actually helps with the funding as well, and there's potential substitution elements available to us also. So I hope that kind of covers that.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Just in regards to the TEL fund, I'm just curious as to why that wasn't a fund to be looked at, considering the emergency nature of what happened and how we sort of were able to use that for Waiora House.
Sure, we did consider that, but we felt that with the disaster recovery reserve there and the other funding options available to us, that we were comfortable to cover it this way.
Thank you, through the chair. Just noting Councillor Park's question about the TEL fund. My understanding of part of the rationale for the TEL fund was because we self-insured that was a fund that helped offset emergencies such as this. So I guess what I'm trying to understand, and particularly with the water and wastewater reserves, because a lot of those projects will be interrelated, I don't want to be shifting as we look about priorities, how we manage those projects and whether they move into subsequent years or how that's going to work. I'd really like to understand that as we move down this path, because we need to just make sure from a governance perspective that the priorities are in the right places for the infrastructure, and because I think there will be other ramifications.
I guess whilst Dennis and Neil went through that, I guess at a macro level, in terms of the TEL fund, one of the things that the team always looks at, obviously that is there, and we've always talked about that being there for disaster recovery in the case of an emergency. There's a couple of things from that, of course. One is we don't know what other emergencies are going to be around the corner, so you don't want to exhaust other opportunities. Second is that things like your water, wastewater reserves, and in fact the disaster recovery fund are there for this very purpose, so you wouldn't use a fund which isn't there for an exact purpose when you do have those funds available sitting there, bearing in mind what you say, which Dennis will get to in terms of what gets substituted because of that. And the third, probably very important part, particularly in Neil and Alan's minds when looking at that, is of course the TEL fund is an income generating stream, and so you wouldn't use something which is generating an income until you have to. It's almost a last resort thing, because then you lose that income as well, so the cost to the ratepayer becomes larger and ongoing over a period of years.
In answer to your question, Councillor, as Neil said earlier, we're not going to know the final costs until after the job's done. That's the time when we need to sit down, once we've got actual costs, to work out what the actual effect is. Substitution, we need to look at prioritisation. I would give an example. We've got lots of AC water main pipe. Do we really want to defer AC water main pipes to do this? So once we get the final quantum of costs, then we can start making some informed decisions. No.
Yeah, so sorry, through the chair, just to add to that, that's something that we're very keen on, is actually just continuing on with our renewals program, because we've got $2.6 million in the wastewater alone. We've committed a lot of that already through contracts which are partway through, and we want to not create this problem elsewhere. So we want to use the reserves like reserves, and we definitely want to maintain our compliance record, which is we're struggling to maintain, to be honest. You know, we want to keep that up and foremost, and continue on with our renewals, both in the water and the wastewater.
Well, I guess the point I was trying to make.
Councillor Body?
I'm quite happy with the way this is panning at the moment, with what the officers of the council are looking at. I'm very pleased that we're going to leave the TEL fund alone. But I think also if we look at the reserves in both wastewater and water, and I think it's not only reserves, it's the renewals. There's about 10 million sitting there between those two. Until we see what we can get from those other two, potential funding, mainly the potential funding, is this too early to say which comes where, or do we leave it in your hands?
Yeah, I mean, it's too early to give you the final numbers, but I mean, our recommendation is that these are the funding sources that we would use.
Any further questions? I just I hope the councillors agree to include the renewal of that water main down Ferry Road. I think that's obviously fairly important. We've had a couple of breaks down there, and I think that needs to be included somehow, either in the resolution or somewhere.
Yes, Councillor, as I said earlier, what I do is once all of the discussion about the report's done, I then take you back to the recommendation, and providing council agrees with what you were talking about, including that water main and the contingency, then I would take you through the recommendation, change the numbers if you're happy with that recommendation. It's only the numbers that will change, and then you could make your decision.
Dennis, just before you do, the one thing that a couple of the councillors have asked me about is when we do that water main, what's the disruption likely to be to the road and to the surrounding area?
It wouldn't be fenced off like the current water main has been. There is going to be some disruption to traffic, bearing in mind that I only asked the contractor yesterday to provide a price. He hasn't yet got his head around exactly how he's going to manage the site. What we'll be trying to do is manage it as best as possible. There'll probably be some form of road closure, but it may well be a stop-go situation. But what we'll be trying to do is manage it so we retain access to everyone that might be affected.
I suppose the Ferry Road portion wouldn't interrupt quite as much as perhaps further down the Lake Terrace.
No, what we'll be looking to do is put in another drill string like we've done on the Ruapehu Street end, so there'll be a hole down the bottom end of Ruapehu where we go, bottom of Ferry Road, where we'll join on to the existing pipe, and there's a hole midway along the road where the existing drill string ends. So it's those two areas that we have to manage, and whether we can get traffic around them. As I say, it might be stop-go.
Yeah, just further to Councillor Hickling's comments, though, there are some businesses down that far end of Ferry Road that have suffered. I mean, you go down to that coffee cart there, it's actually closed at the moment. And there are businesses and tourism operators down there that have no through traffic. And so it is quite a serious matter for a lot of those businesses. So any extensions of disruption could make a big difference to those businesses.
Thank you. The Ferry Road water main, where does that go to?
It goes into the harbour
Under
across
the
to
harbour.
Nukahau.
The reason I raised it is, remember, if we go back to the last long-term plan, I advocated that we retain the water treatment plant in Acacia Bay in case of emergencies. I think this might be a little bit of a warning that those pipes go down. There's one over the bridge, I believe, one across the harbour. That whole side of this area here, including out Hooker Falls Road, have no water.
Look at the recommendation now. And so you've got the recommendation up there in front of you. The unbudgeted expenditure of 4.5 would become 5 million. The engagement of item 3, estimated sum of 4.29 million. And the engagement of Opus for an estimated cost of 460,000.
Through the chair, can I just ask a question? Because you don't know what the final costs or anything are, Downers are aware this is not a target.
The lead project manager for council is well aware that this is not a target, and the lead project manager is being very, very careful about how much it costs.
So through Cheney, can you just change that to 5 million? Thanks.
Not $5.
Yeah, thanks.
Wanted something in there, we could just say to be funded by a combination of, and list those. Yeah.
Well, it will be minuted, but I'm just making a point.
Chairman, am I right that you two gentlemen have thoughts as to which of those 5 that Councillor Hickling's mentioned will actually be used?
I kind of probably hope that most of them will be used, to be honest.
Right, all of them. Okay,
Yeah. I'd love not to use loans. We really need to wait until the project's finished so we can ascertain exactly where, and obviously a meeting with McDen.
Look, through the chair, I'm quite comfortable to cover those funding stream conversations in the minutes, but I guess I'll leave that to the chair. I just wouldn't want our resolutions to read like our minutes, that's all.
Well, if councillors are comfortable with that resolution, is there a mover and a seconder, please?
Through the chair, I'm happy to move this resolution, and I'd just like to say that in the initial response, I was I got to witness the staff and the contractors in action, and they all did a fantastic job, and it's been really great to be sort of involved in the process, down to I regularly go and see the affected businesses and keep them updated and whatnot. The enormity of that hole down there was unbelievable, but you sort of don't really appreciate how small we are until you have contractors from Auckland coming down saying, oh, this is nothing, sort of thing. Also, with the reinstatement of the pavements that is talked about, will that also include the affected business side, where it can just have a bit of a tidy up, bit of a water blast, because I know that they would really appreciate that as well. Yeah, so I'm happy to move this.
So I'd like to make a comment regarding the fact that our head contractor Downers, I think it's sort of spelt out to me that it's probably wise having a big contractor, because we was able to pull in from Auckland and their bigger company to give that service to this particular project. So it gives you a bit of comfort in terms of dealing with some of those issues. I don't know how Dennis feels about that comment.
I would agree with you, Councillor Hickling. I think the other thing that a company like Downer bring to this type of project, and I think Councillor Park mentioned it, they've had expertise in large, complex situations, and so that management is something that you can't get unless you've experienced it, and they've been able to bring that along as well.
Okay, well, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Aye. Carried.
Right, so extension of testing services agreement. So firstly, I'll take that the report is read. The testing service agreement is nearing the end of its contract term, so it expires end of February. So the process for renewing that agreement is well underway, with an ROI expected to be released this week. However, following the Lake Terrace trunk main failure, we've faced some significant delays in that process. So we're therefore seeking approval to extend the existing agreement by 3 months to 31st of May 2020, and that will ensure we complete the contract renewal process to the required standard. And it will also provide the current contractor with some extended notice, which would be appropriate given that they've supported us very well with the events of the last couple of months. So I have a recommendation there, and an embarrassing correction to make, because the total cost given there is for 2 months, not 3, and it should read 17406.
Just through the chair, can I, because this can be funded through existing budgets, I'm just wondering why it's come to us, because the CEO does have financial delegation for
This is because of the total cost of the contract is quite not higher than that. Yeah.
The resolution's been amended. 174.
1700406. Yeah.
406. Yep. Okay, any questions, or if not, there's a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Body. All in favour? Aye, carried.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Sorry to bring a project like this to you on a day when you've just had big numbers thrown at you from Dennis. And, I guess what this paper is about is detailing the change required to the Kinloch wastewater treatment plant works program. Sort of been signalling over the last year, I suppose, through the monthly reports that there's a process review been going on and some changes are going to be needed. And we've got to the point now where we know what those changes are, what they're required to be, and what it means is bringing forward the budgets that we've got in the current work program as it stood, and increasing that budget by approximately $2.8 million. And the fundamental change there is it's a step change in treatment process. Basically, it's going from what we call a sequencing batch reactor process, which is a biological treatment plant, to a membrane process, which you can get more capacity in a smaller area and a higher level of performance, so a high level of nitrogen removal. And the reason for this is for the timing, there's two bits that have affected it. One is Kinloch's growing quickly, and we did have a flow meter issue which affected our calculations. We've had a bit of a problem with data across all our water and wastewater sites for the last couple of years, and we've been investing in that pretty strongly to sort that out. So yes, it's going to cost some more. There are some benefits of improved nitrogen performance, nitrogen removal, but the main benefit is that it's a longer term solution. It means that the current, it'll deal with the scope of the Kinloch structure plan. We won't have to be coming back to do anything else at a later date. It also has the ability to be expanded further beyond that if the Kinloch structure plan ever was to change. Not saying that's on the books, but things change. Whereas what was in the plan previously, process review identified that was going to have some deficiencies. At first thought was it would be a tweak to get it there, but it's actually more fundamental than a tweak. It's a change in treatment technology. So any questions?
Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the first page under that 5.5 it states proposed change in 18-19 year you've got shown 1743 1.743 million.
Yes.
Yet our annual plan for 1920 shows 1.7.
So yeah, this is always a source of confusion. It's depending on whether you look which table you're looking at in an annual plan, because there's inflated values and non-inflated values, and yeah, it's confusing.
The one B
and
figure.
I think I changed the table back and forward a couple of times. Which one do I put in? You're more likely to recognise those numbers, so that's what I went with.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Michael. Look, I remember when you came to the community back at the LTP time and we talked about asset management and what we were planning. I don't think at the time, though, that we indicated to the community that we had some doubt on the process that you mention in this paper.
I guess we need to confirm in our own minds first before we, I guess at that point in time we thought the change was probably going to be a tweak more than a kind of step change.
Because I do remember also at the time the community saying our feeling of growth and what's happening there is bigger than what you council were telling us. So I guess the lesson here is maybe we should take some more of those signals sooner, because we now need to go back and talk to the community about what is happening here. And one of the questions they're going to ask us and we need to be able to answer is, if a lot of this additional investment is growth, how much of that is being paid by the development contributions made for the development of the new sections that are contributing to this? Could I have a bit of a steer on that one? Because I've got a KRG meeting this week and that question will come up.
Yeah, so Neil might be able to add, but I can add to this as well. So I guess the plant that was in the original proposal has a lesser capacity, so correct me if I'm wrong here now. So so the way you work out the DC for that on the wastewater front is you divide that cost by the units of capacity that it provides. So this plant, although it is more expensive, it provides more units of capacity as well. So you've got opportunity to collect greater on it. Yes, that's right. As the town grows. Yeah.
we'll need to do the full calculations on where that cost allocation goes, in, as what Mike's alluding to there. And the other point I guess I'd just make is that the bringing forward of that and increasing of that money, that will be built into the 2021 annual plan. So that's the process of how that occurs.
Yeah, so that's right. The project is underway, but we're not asking for any additional funding. We've got enough in this current year to do what we need to do.
This was about, as Mike says, we're not asking for any funding or unbudgeted or anything like that. It's just about, we didn't want to paint you into a picture that come the next annual plan that we were asking to put that extra 6.5 in and you weren't aware of the reasons for it.
Yeah, so through the chair, this is just really a really early heads up. The advantage of getting this in now and getting this stuff into the next annual plan is that can go into your development contributions calculations moving forward. And again, it's just a little call out on the actual amount of people there, so the growth in that area. Plus that combined with we're doing a lot of work in the telemetry on our water and wastewater, and we found out that some of the results we were getting there, which was a surprise to us and a surprise to WRC as well, that we had to just recalculate those things, and it got it just to the cusp of when an SBR plant would be useful and expanding that, and it turned it into a totally different treatment process, which is better for the nitrogen removal, but also better for growth going forward. So it's just a matter of combinations of each of those.
Yeah, so I guess it comes in an environment of increasing pressure from regional council as well across all of our water and wastewater consents.
So Mike, am I right in thinking that the MBR membranes are the same as Lake Terrace? No.
We've got two
Or
membrane
similar?
plants in the district. We've got the Turangi wastewater treatment plant. It's a much more modern, robust version of that.
Okay.
They're using similar technology to they're similar.
These are the ones imported from China, aren't they? Is that correct?
These ones, this won't be coming from China, these membranes. Well, I shouldn't say that in advance of procurement, but they're not renowned for their wastewater membrane.
Any further questions? Well, Mike's here. Okay, there's a recommendation there. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Williamson, all in favour? Aye. Carried. Spar Road redevelopment. Helmuth. Right.
Kia ora, Chair, Councillors. So this is item following on from our workshop on the 13th of June, where Councillors indicated a direction of a rebuild on 129 Spar Road, incorporating the existing contract that we have with our community, the Youth Hub LTP project, which is scheduled for next financial year. So the recommendation is to direct council officers to develop a plan for the site and then come back to council for approval of that.
Councillor Paul?
Oh, thank you. This is something that the youth centre part is something I advocated for 3 years ago, and something that I was really pleased to see made retained in the long-term plan. I was really, really impressed with Anamata Cafe's submission to the LTP at the time, and about the different possibilities and partnerships with funding and staffing and things going forward. So I'd happily move this with great enthusiasm, Councillor Hickling, and look forward to seeing what comes back.
Yeah, just on that, Councillor, so we've currently got 700,000 in external funding applications out there. So with Bay Trust, we've been moved to the business case scenario, which we'll present to Bay Trust in the next coming months. and an additional 400,000 with 2 other funders as well.
Through the chair, I absolutely support Councillor Polk's comments. I will second the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor.
I'd like to support these things as well. I was at no, I wasn't. I was at Taupo District this morning and speaking to Assembly, and the youth there are really engaged and want to be part of this, of a whole process, and I know that the senior part would really be interested in being part of this as well, so I'm totally in support.
Just further on from that, Chair, just through the Chair, I'd like to acknowledge Wate Liwai, back there, who's been part of the process since 2015.
I just have to make a comment. I can't let it go without making a comment that at least you considered Hickling Park for this, and I would have been really pleased, but I can see the benefits of it going into Waiora site. But yeah. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors.
So I know the resolution's passed, Chair. Just want to confirm that you're comfortable with the rebuild of Waiora House, because the paper is 2 parts. Kawai? Very good. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Are we all comfortable with that?
Just that the recommendation talks about, firstly, the rebuild of Waiora House for a social development hub, and the second part is to include on that redevelopment a youth hub.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I was at the workshop at that particular meeting.
Kawai.
Just within that, within the recommendation, and I support it totally, but the concept of what Waiora House as was would look like in a new situation will be another discussion. But that's my understanding.
That's what the master plan does, is identify what that looks like.
Yep.
All comfortable? Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillors' June financial report. So, Gareth.
So through the Chair, Ellen can come up and we'll start going through the financials and the performance level, but performance measures. The only couple of things I'll mention is and she's obviously away today in Australia with her boy, but obviously I have my first councillor confirmed pre the election, so Councillor Truman goes unopposed, which is great in terms of having that first councillor up, as well as the Turangi subdivision part of the Turangi-Tongariro Community Board, and with 4 new members there, so that's a good step in the right direction. Obviously we've got elections coming up, as you're all fully aware. Then the other 2 points I'll just highlight from my report is obviously the Kittle Drive, Arrowsmith Avenue, Napier Road changes, which we're about to commence. We've just started the communications around that with some Facebook comms last week, with a fairly good response from that. And then the last one, a little bit of good news in light of all of our emergencies that we've had, is the Otamuheki Hot Stream being a finalist in the Keep New Zealand Beautiful Awards in 2 categories, actually, the stream itself and also the toilets. So we're not a finalist for the most beautiful large town this year, but we are still finalists in that award, which will be decided in a dinner in Dunedin in October. That will go to Ellen.
Thank you. Through the Chair, this is work in progress as far as the year-end financials. As you understand, we are currently going through a 2-week audit by Audit New Zealand, and these numbers here are in a similar format to which you've previously received on a monthly report. They will be different to what is actually the audited annual accounts, because they don't include any revaluation of assets and things of that nature. But basically we ended up the year in a favourable position, 2.8 million ahead of the full year budget. And as far as our financial position is concerned, as referred to earlier, the net borrowings of 11.8. The difference between that and what was budgeted is really the difference you'll see between the capital expenditure and what the budgeted capital expenditure was. So it's about 16.6, 16.8 difference between the two. So that's, if we had to spend all our capex, then our net position would have been about the 28.4, which is shown as the full year budget. Okay, if you look at the page that shows the borrowings, cash investments, net borrowings, capital expenditure, you'll see a full year budget figure underneath. If you look at the difference between those numbers and those last two boxes, if 44.7 had been spent on capital expenditure, we would have ended up with a net difference of 28.4 or thereabouts. So the capital program has impacted on our need to borrow money, which is quite logical. Yes. Well, some of it is capital expenditure that's been determined that's not needed. Yeah, so there's a mixture of, well, I don't know what the split is, but you also need to remember that we've had a lot of unbudgeted expenditure as well, which has used up cash. So it's a bit of a circle. So taking it from an investment side, that's also been a challenge because you've now got OCR at the year end at 1.5, it's now dropped to 1, yet we set ourselves targets of 3.75% return on the TL fund. Fortunately, we have exceeded the investment return on the TL fund, exceeded the investment return on the general fund, and our interest paid on our borrowing has been less than budget. So we've had 3 ticks. It's going to be a challenge to keep an investment return up at that level with the tools in our toolbox going forward.
Just looking at that, thanks Alan, with Roseanne's question, looks like the wastewater one is the one that's the most significant. About $4 million to $11 million budgeted, and about 4.4 actually spent. That's a good graph. It gives a good illustration how the breakdown.
Yeah,
the actual budget.
Yeah. Through the chair, I'll let Kevin speak to the 3 waters and transport.
52 is it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just risk and regulatory in terms of the community services area. Nothing really to add more to the financial and non-financial information you've already got, or the CEO's opening report, other than to say, to acknowledge the work of the staff in this space, what can be a challenging one, and in particular my direct reports, Jamie Dale, Ian Connon, Michelle McGill, Scott Davenport, and of course Nigel McCaddy. So all working extremely hard on behalf of council and the community. So really nothing more to add in this space. I think the figures and the non-financial speak for themselves, and just to acknowledge the work of the team over the year. And there's plenty of challenges to come.
Any questions of Brian? Nope. Thanks, Brian.
probably just take all of the different activities read. What I will do though is just an overview of all of the projects that have been delivered. Just quickly, it was $26.7 million worth of spend this year, and that's 34% or another 6.4 million than the previous year, and that also doubled what we did probably 4 years ago as far as spend. And there's also another $0.8 million worth of unbudgeted work that was finished in the financial year as well. And what we've got, and just it answers Councillor Williamson's question, is we've got $5.8 million of committed work, so it's most of the way through contracts, and a lot of that's in the wastewater down in Turangi and other places around that. So substantive piece of work. Obviously the team, as in Brian's area, been working exceptionally well with all this other work that's on top of that. And through the year, emergencies seems to be what we've done this year with Wairoa House, with asbestos in the landfill down at Turangi, with Aerosmith. The list just goes on and on. And in the compliance area for this team in particular, the bar has just risen so much in the water sector and also in the wastewater sector as well. So there's a lot of stuff there that we're having to play catch up on to make sure that we're, the status quo is not acceptable. We have to be improving just to stay above that bar. So I'll leave it at that and take any questions. Thanks. Thanks.
Do mine from here. Community facilities, Mr. Chair. Kevin's actually taken off my 2 points I was going to raise, which was around Wilder House. You'll see the screens have come down. The fencing is still up, but the screens are down, so you can see what's behind the veil. So we're just waiting on final completion or final testing of the soils, and at which point we'll be able to get on with landscaping and getting that back to green space while we do that master planning process that you just approved. So the community facilities space is very much working through that. Obviously Kevin's comments around emergencies is very topical, but there's also some other projects going on at the venue space and also the event centre and the wastewater space. So that's the only update I have.
Okay.
I haven't really got anything further to add to what's there.
So I'm not sure about investments because we covered that. Economic development, so obviously the PGF application's in. 12th of September is when we'll get some indication if there's been some success there. Pardon? Of course. The other thing is, EGLT presented to the Turangi board the other week on the work in Turangi. I think it's really important to acknowledge that bit of work. They've just made an appointment for a project manager, which isn't an Avril replacement, but it's more of a manager to run some significant ED projects such as broadband and a couple of other PGF type bits of work. The formal announcement's not been made yet, so I can't name names, but they'll be well known and they're pretty good person. That's all I've got to say, really.
There's a general question, if someone can help me. This is the full year budget to the 30th of June. Were there any outstanding projects in any of these cost centres? Every month we get the circle and we get the dots. They're not there, and most of the items will have full year budget 00 or full year budget 3.7. Why aren't we getting the 12 months of expenditure in this last financial report?
I should have brought some chocolate fish actually, because I was wondering whether anyone would pick up that error. So well done, John. I'll find you a chocolate fish. Yeah, and my apologies. We've got some little fancy macros that throw this report together, and I was just sitting at the back there and noticed that obviously one of the macros broke and hasn't brought through the full year budgets in the grey boxes. But however, if you look at the numbers in the actual tables, which is the blue shaded areas, you'll see the full year budgets in there. So my apologies for that little error. But and if you look in the table itself, you'll see the numbers.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Move on to the Treasury Management Report. Alan spoke through that. So that's it. So just go back to the resolution, and we need a mover and a seconder that Council notes the information contained in the financial report for June 2019. Councillor Williamson, Councillor Jolens, all in favour? Aye, carried. Right, item 5.8, which is engagement for September.
So
Dates
Mr. Chair,
down there.
Yep, there's still a bit of work to do for the month, and got nothing further to add at the moment. We're still trying to find out a suitable date for the NRB survey presentation that Tanya spoke to you about earlier, and we'll let you know when we've managed to nail that one. And then the only other one there is Zone 2 meeting in Whakatane, 19th and 20th September. Anybody would like to put their name down for that?
Any starters for that 2 day? Okay, good, thanks, John.
The survey that Tanya's talking about, are we able to get a hard copy of that, or do we have to wait for a meeting?
I'm not too sure, but I'll certainly find out for you. Yep.
Yes, I've just been lucky enough to be going to the colleges in Taupo this month, and I was at Taupo Nuitia this morning, and I'll be back there on Thursday, and I was at Tahara College a few weeks ago, and the engagement that is coming through from the youth of those colleges is amazing, and I'm pretty sure that Council will have a lot more positive engagement with our youth coming up. It's been really, really rewarding.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Maggie, for doing that. Any other comments?
Need to take these glasses off, I can't see. I'm getting old, middle-aged disease, they call it, for the eyes. Look, I just had 2 verbal reports to give. One was to do with the Museum and Arts Centre. Councillor Hickling and I have had a few meetings with some of the key stakeholders in that mix who are keen to understand the next steps in this process. And we've had some conversations with Philip King as well, acknowledging that the funding for this new process doesn't actually kick in until July next year. But what we're trying to do effectively, long story short, is get all our ducks in a row. We're looking at putting together a working group of key stakeholders to help input into that process, and working with Mr. looking to have a look at what the different funding streams are that we'll need to apply to for the balance of this, because it's 1/3 us, 2/3 everyone else, looking at what some of those parties' requirements will be to put forward bids for funding, and we're going to sort of backfill it to get us through the process. But we are getting some traction on there. We still have a lot of enthusiasm from the community for this project. So I'd just like to thank Councillor Hickling for his help on that matter. Just the other point to acknowledge, a couple of months ago you guys approved funding for me to attend the OPIS Making Good Decisions Chair Recertification course. I just wanted to report back that I've attended the training, done the assessments, and I have got the certification chairmanship. Should be up on all the ministry sites now. So thank you for that, and it was a lot of work, but it's done.
A couple of things. Acknowledging Councillor Jollins as the advocate for the Friends of the Museum. We both attended the AGM on Sunday. It was actually quite a good turnout. I think they were pretty happy, about 20, I think. So it was quite heartening. There's a lot of conversation around about the potential new museum going forward, the next long-term plan. So the second thing, I went to the Lake Taupo Catchment Committee meeting on the 29th, and where Kevin, along with Kevin, who presented a report on the incident down the lakefront there.
Sorry, that just reminded me, Anne McLeod is stepping down, and tomorrow there is a farewell cup of tea for her. If you just give me a second, I'm sorry, I'll just check my diary. Starts tomorrow. Sorry. Can you please give me the detail?
She's setting up her own consultancy business to deal with strategy type matters. So yeah, we're looking at engaging her for one particular piece of work, which she's we're working with her at the moment.
And there was 4 councillors that we had lunch with a party from Shaoxing on Friday. Yeah, cool. He got his cell phone with a lot of photographs on, so it was helping him to communicate. Yeah.
Appreciation to councillors that attended the last workshop with our community board. This relationship is vital, and so we just, for me coming here was just to show that appreciation, and thank you for coming to Turangi. Also next week, Councillor Stewart and I, along with Tina and Andy, are heading to our sister city, Kita Shiobara. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further comments, we'll close the meeting, and we need to... Oh, sorry. Yeah, we just need to move the members' report. So it's been moved by Councillor Jolins, seconded by Councillor Kingy. All in favour? Aye, carried.